was fantastic. Oliver, absolutely fantastic. Randah, do you want to jump in with our Q&A?
Yes, I'm trying to find the beginning of it, but I think the first one is the one that you mentioned at the very beginning. I think the first slide.
8:39.
Asking.
8:39 was the first question.
8:39. Okay. Oh, thank you. All right. So I think, where was it? No, is that a question? I think it was the very first slide when you said, if organizations know this, why don't they implement it? Why didn't they all implement it if research is known about it? But I'm trying to find where is that first slide.
Yeah, it's a really good question. The problem is that the people who are signing the checks in organizations have a very short-term view. So we think about goal setting, they have career goals they want to achieve themselves, which typically don't last more than 3 to 5 years into the future. And they have a budget each year that they need to meet, otherwise they're not going to be able to progress. So that budget is associated with lots of numbers, and those numbers end up becoming the people. People end up becoming ones and zeros, and that's the problem. And if organizations truly knew the importance and the impact of focusing on people, they would change and flip that dynamic. So I like to remind organizations that on average, your real estate costs are around about 10% of your outgoings, whereas the other 90% is people. So if you're cramming people into smaller spaces every year, packing them tight and stacking them high, that's going to have a negative effect on the 90%, right? And it does. And like at the moment, only 64% of the population would agree that their workplace allows them to work productively. And the irony is, working from home, 82% productivity sentiment agreement. So we're having a better experience at home than we are at work because of a whole variety of factors. But that's really an issue for me, is that we're spending all this money on workplaces, but we're not doing it in a purposeful, meaningful, and human-centered way. And that's why I'm quite passionate about getting in front of as many people as I can to hold that torch, fly that flag.
Yeah. So I just want to do a quick follow-up on what you just said before I move to the other questions. When you said when we're working from home, our productivity increase, does that include the fact that there are no more time boundaries because we don't finish work at a certain time and go home? We just continue working throughout the night. So is that factored into the productivity number?
Well, on average, we work 42 minutes extra a day. So obviously there are case studies, anecdotal people, those that shout the loudest, I'm working all the time, the hours, the God-given hours that I get. But the data is saying that it's around 42 minutes extra a day. But that's not necessarily longer. We knew from before the pandemic, when people work remotely, they typically work through their lunch. They also don't have to commute anymore, so that commute time is gone, so that's good time for working. They do, yes, put the washing on and do shuttle runs to the fridge for the next nugget of cheese. And they'll listen to the radio and they'll distract themselves and they'll do some stuff they needed to do to get done at home. But productivity spikes because there's more time. The perceived productivity of working from home is because of lack of interruptions, and they're still able to collaborate because of technology today. That wouldn't have been the case 30 years ago. Also, you don't have your boss kind of breathing down your neck, or they can see you working. Because if I can't see you working, then how do I know you're working? Well, if you have that mentality, then you have no place being a manager in this world. It never was appropriate. If you're not managing people on output, that's your own fault. If you're managing them just on input and being able to see them, then I can tell you what, I can skive off, I can do zero work sat right in front of you. I can do that, not a problem. But when I'm working from home, I kind of have this guilt sometimes. I'm just like, I need to make sure that I'm producing, and I've got these targets, so I want to surpass them even more so than when I'm in the office, because it's like, well, everyone knows I'm here. So yeah, there's lots to be taken into consideration for the working from home, but we're seeing it more as distributed work now. So not just working from home, not just offices, also coffee shops, co-working, third spaces, lots of locations around the office as well, not just a desk and a chair. That's not the plethora of.
Wow, that's brilliant. Okay, question. Does the organization have a responsibility for our entire life work environment? And how do we get them thinking forward since we have been pushed there?
Good question. They do. So from my point of view, and governments, certain governments around the world, it's theirs as well, they share the same one, that the employer is responsible for wherever work is happening. So the British government, that's been their law for many years now. So if you were a remote or a teleworker, I suppose was the old terminology that we used to use in the UK, then you had to provide the employee with ergonomic tools. You probably even have to pay for Wi-Fi and electricity and heating as well to a degree. But again, employers are going to hear things like that and go, well, where are we going to find the money to do that? I don't want to pay all those fees. Inconsequential to the positive effect it will have on the people. The people are what driving businesses forward, right? Without people, you've got nothing, unless you're a crypto company, I suppose, where you don't need anybody. But if you need people to do work, then we have to remember that the baseline for engagement at the moment, that global average is 15%, 1-5. So anything you can do to increase the engagement, the passion and purpose that people have for their jobs is going to really add to the bottom line and deliver tangible business benefits and ROI. So if that means paying for their internet, which is like $30 a month, or it means buying them a Herman Miller task chair, which is like say $1,000, or getting them an ergonomic keyboard so that they're not getting carpal tunnel, or all of those things is inconsequential to the massive gains that can be had from increasing engagement.
Awesome. So we have a comment from Maha. I love that you're getting feedback on this from your clients. It's a very human-centered approach. And I agree. And it's followed by a question. Is this a big shift for employers? What does your research tell you about change and the reason to resist?
Changes are coming. Unfortunately, it's more of a generational shift that seems to be having the impact. So as we get a larger proportion of the millennials in the workplace, that's kind of shifting more towards the human side of things and less towards the kind of commercial element, because they understand that the commercial element is important, but figuring out the people, that's where the ramifications come from. So it's going to be a change in the guard that is really going to create the big effects here. But it also depends on where you are in the world. Obviously we live in a society here in Dubai that is, very expatriate. There's people from all over the world here, and it's typically a younger demographic as well. So this is why, we see workplaces that are more forward-thinking here than you would see in, let's just look at the GCC as an example. So we have the largest proportion of expats, right? Then you look at Kuwait and Saudi, they have less expats, right? So they have an older working population. If you look at their workplaces, you can see the trend there. Many of them are still stuck with the cubicle and struggling to get out. And, even if you look at the finishes and the colors that they use, it's still like some reds, purples, maroons, and mahogany, like in Saudi and Kuwait, whereas here, it's white. And I know I'm stereotyping and being very general here, but I think it's a reflection of the generations that are here, and also having to take into consideration all of the different regions that are here. So the religions, the beliefs, the different types of people, so that has an effect in the way that we shape our environment.
Oh, correct. And also the different perception of status. So status can come from your job title, but it can come from so many different things, especially when you're in a collective society. So there were a bunch of comments all about food, snacks, cheese, and working from home related to how productive you are the closer you are to the fridge. But then we have a question, I think. I wonder how much this will change the culture at organizations where FaceTime is a big part of the role.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Yeah, we had lots of organizations before the pandemic that told their employees that they couldn't work remotely ever because they just simply weren't in a role that would allow that to occur. Then the pandemic hit and we really saw, what's the saying? We really saw, where the reality lied there. So I work with a lot of architects. Architects were adamant that we're going to go bust because our people have to be physically co-located together. For the most part, it's more about the command and control element of the organization than it is about what they're are able to accomplish. So the pandemic has kind of pulled back the screen and demonstrated that's indeed the case for many different organizations. But at the same time, those people who have relinquished control, they've seen that they can actually trust their employees. So before the pandemic, there was a Harvard Business Review article, I can put it in the chat actually if you'd like, that showed that there was only, before the pandemic, 14% of employers believed their employees could work remotely. And then in June of last year, that was at 42%. So there's been a big kind of C-suite shift in mentality about what their people are able to accomplish. And as a psychologist, this is a fantastic thing for me because I know there's something called the Pygmalion effect or the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe your people are capable of this much, then guess what? That's all they're ever going to be able to accomplish. Whereas if your people don't have that kind of glass ceiling or that limit on their capabilities, then what they will produce will constantly astonish and astound you, right? So that's the important thing, is like not to limit your people, right? The perception that you have of them is the confines that you're giving them. So don't do it.
Yeah, and then we'll find ways to build a culture of collaboration, whether you are face to face or remotely. So are there things we can do for ourselves to boost our workplace environment, or for example, if we are self-employed?
I think consider the space for each activity. So most people have given a desk and a chair, but that's not sufficient enough for them to do 100% of their job. As an example, you have meetings to attend. Maybe you're sat on a row of 6 people. And if you're having a Zoom call like this, or doing a presentation, that's going to interrupt everybody. So think about the activities you're doing and the spaces that you might want to do it within. Now, nobody really consciously thinks about this. They just kind of migrate unconsciously, holding their laptop if they're blessed with one. But consider that when you're working from home as well, because you want to shift your posture. Posture changes your mindset. Everybody has a kitchen, right? And I guarantee your kitchen sides are standing height. So you have a standing height option there, right? So you can go from the sofa to standing height to a traditional seated height. You can go work in the garden, get some sunlight early in the morning or late in the afternoon when the light's not liable to just fry your laptop. So think about different settings for different activities and do try and stretch and change your posture kind of on the hour, every hour, we really recommend. And I know it's difficult to do that because you get locked into the digital world when you're typing away or when you're on calls.
Yeah.
Have different settings to do.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And we've seen, I think most of us have seen examples where people would take their laptops into places they shouldn't take them also because they're part of the meetup. But then, yeah, this is great that you find different places. It's not, you don't need to be locked down in an office position because that's what we assume we should be. So another question is how can I, as an employee, personally focus and align those priorities? I think the priorities, the 8 priorities that you had, I just set personally, regardless of my situation in my job.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that you probably should share your results with your management, just to let them know. Just say, look, I've been doing some thinking for the new year. I wanted to kind of figure out where my priorities lie. I wanted to set some goals for myself, but I realized if it wasn't a goal for an area that was a priority, I probably wasn't going to achieve it. So according to Herman Miller research, in the white paper, this is what motivates people at work and inside workplaces today. This is what's important, and this is where there's a deficit. I'm going to try and figure out from my side what I can do to increase those deficit levels. But I'd just like to hear from you as my manager, where you think I could focus in those deficits to move myself a little closer to my targets. And you'll find, it's that transparency. You're letting them into your unconscious mind, because it is your unconscious mind. Now you're consciously aware of these elements, so you can get them down. But before, they were just kind of lingering in there. They're just floating around, influencing your behavior in subtle and cool ways. But now you can develop a strategy, so you can align it very laser targeted with the direction that you want to.
And you're more aware of it now that it's brought to your attention. You can also share it with your colleague to see, do you agree? Like, you don't need to agree, but it's like, do you all think the same thing? Is the same category important to all of you? Because if there is a difference, then just knowing that, it's like, okay, now I know, for me, freedom is high, but for you, status is high. So now I know what you want. So I can work with you now. We don't need to clash anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, I find it very effective exercise. Thank you. What do you expect from Generation Z or Z?
Yeah, it's interesting because the younger generations, when they come to the workplace, they're typically the happiest with offices. You've probably heard at conferences people saying like, millennials are a nightmare, all they want is beanbags and football tables and PlayStations and stuff like that. It's actually the older generations that are the least happy with their offices and workplaces. And the reason why that is the case is it's about role complexity. When you start your job, it's quite simplistic in comparison to when you finish your career, how many different activities you have to do as part of your role when you end your career. You get more. You don't get given less things to do as you get older. You get given more because you get more competence at your job. So the less things you have to do, the less spaces you require to do them within. Typically, you might be fine with just a desk and a chair, or access to a meeting room and a cafeteria. But as you get older, as roles get more complex, the more spaces you need to do those more complex roles within. So you might need more highly focused spaces where you are less likely to be interrupted. You might need more booths for Zoom meetings, that sort of stuff. So the younger generations, I'm not particularly focused on right now because they're happier. It's the older generations and catering for those that are more disgruntled is what I'm trying to figure out. But also there's a relationship that they're happier to work remotely. And that's great. We know where they're happy, but we also don't want to lose that brain drain, that knowledge exchange. So we want to create environments that will encourage them to come back without mandating that you have to come back. So if you mandate, people leave their hearts and minds at home. They'll just come in, engagement plummets. So how can we create an environment that's so compelling that you're drawn to it? Like a co-working facility. Co-working, people pay to go to the office. That's a really interesting model, right? So if you work in an office and tomorrow it turned into a co-working facility, would you pay to go into it? Probably not.